Turbulent weather systems collide off the island's coast, causing vicious storms and dangerous swirls. Over centuries, Icelandic sailors have learned to respect the ocean's power and to ask God's help to sail it with a prayer. Iceland's coastline is peppered with churches. Their altars are the last place a sailor would visit before going to sea, and the first place he would visit on his return.
Drottinn minn og Guð minn, þegar ég nú ræð til fiskveiða og finn vanmátt minn og veikleika bátsins gegn huldum kröftum lofts og lagar.
But prayers offered no guarantees. So many sailors' graves testify to the Atlantic's brutal force.
The sea gives and the sea takes away, as we say in Iceland.
Christian joined the fishing industry at a time when cod was king. In 1991, over 1 million metric tons of fish were caught in Iceland's waters. Reykjavik evolved from rustic town to vibrant export capital. But the world that was buying Iceland's fish was changing. Banks were going global. Technology encouraged the free flow of money between nations. Realizing credit was becoming the new king, Christian became a fisheries expert in the bank's seafood division. Like many bankers, he got rich.
We all started taking more holidays abroad, and the bottles in my London wine cellar increased considerably.
The economy boomed. Icelanders tasted the good life and became one of the richest nations in the world for a while. Even fishermen benefited from the credit free-for-all. Banks encouraged them to take out loans secured against their personal fish quotas. Fortunes were borrowed on the promise of fish that hadn't yet been caught. Iceland was hooked on credit. But in 2008, the world economy started to wobble. Stock markets plummeted. Iceland's credit tower collapsed.
Almost overnight, it was as if we were in the middle of a cloud of ash.
The banks had mortgaged Iceland to the hilt. They'd borrowed 6 times the value of the country's gross domestic product, forcing the government into a bailout. For Christian, the news came on the eve of a big corporate presentation.
A week later, the whole banking system in Iceland collapsed, and I was out of a job.
Within 6 months, unemployment rates increased 5-fold. Impoverished Icelanders took to the streets. The kitchen revolution became one of the most violent protests in Icelandic history. Ousting the government that had led them down the path of ruin, the islanders demanded a return to traditional values. Fishing has once again become Iceland's economic lifeline. Real profits from real catches are being used to pay off Iceland's debts. Christian, too, has returned to what he knows best. He started a fishing consultancy company, providing advice to fisheries worldwide. But it's a long road to recovery.
The debts we are now responsible for are so big we can't understand the numbers. What kind of future is there for my children?
The more Icelanders engage with the outside world, the more their own world will change. Before the crash, Iceland was at the center of a prosperous global community. Its economic collapse propelled it back into the remote North Atlantic. Luckily, Icelanders have an aptitude for survival. Centuries of living in an ever-shifting wilderness made them resilient. 1,000 years of isolation shaped the national character. With no neighbors to call on, Icelanders learned to be self-sufficient. With nowhere to run, they learned to endure. Iceland's wilderness is changing on a scale the islanders have never seen before. And in ways that are almost impossible to predict. In a land of snow and ice, the effects of global warming are easy to see. The glaciers that cover 11% of Iceland's landmass are melting. Vatnajökull is Europe's largest ice cap. 800 meters deep, it covers more than 8,000 square kilometers. But it's shrinking at an alarming rate. 100 years ago, there was no lagoon here, just a sheet of ice 30 meters deep. But as Vatnajökull and his outlet glaciers shrink, this lake is filling up, fast. A century ago, the glacial tongue reached out to sea. Now, it's retreated by 2 kilometers. The lagoon left by the shrinking ice has an unearthly beauty. Tourists come to watch this spectacle of global warming happening before their very eyes. But the beauty hides a destructive force. As it extends seawards, this lagoon is threatening to wash away Iceland's main coastal highway. It's a story that's being repeated all over the island. Meltwater and glacial debris are reshaping the landscape. Experts predict that in just a few hundred years, Iceland may have lost all its glaciers. Their retreat will leave behind a very different landscape and climate. What used to fall as snow will fall as rain. The barren earth will become more arable. And sediment washed down from the mountains will transform the coastal ecosystem. As the world warms, Iceland's isolation is melting away. Icelanders are preparing for a very different future, in which the demands of the outside world are a driving force. Many believe it's natural energy that will propel Iceland forward. The landscape is alive with it. It cuts across the earth. It seeps from the ground. Icelanders are world leaders in harnessing its potential. Almost all homes are heated by geothermal energy. But it's glacial rivers that are powering commercial growth. Fast and furious, their potential to generate hydroelectricity is massive, and industrial prospectors are queuing up to harness it. In 2003, aluminium manufacturer Alcoa chose the remote coastal town of Reyðarfjörður as a location for a massive smelting factory. This is one of the biggest industrial developments in Iceland's history. At temperatures of 950 degrees Celsius, liquid aluminium is smelted using high-intensity electrical currents. This process requires huge amounts of energy, and it's hydropower that supplies it, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
In the aluminium plant, they have to keep going round the clock.
Hansína Óladóttir works in the pot room, where the liquid aluminium is extracted from the powder ore. It's tough manual work, but women make up almost a quarter of Fjarðaál's total employees. The factory draws its entire 2,000-strong workforce from the local area. It's shift work, the hours are long, but people aren't complaining.
When people first started talking about building the aluminium plant, we took it as a cause for celebration because employment was falling, job opportunities were drying up, people were moving away.
Before the factory opened, Hansína worked in a kindergarten and her husband in a local fish factory. With 2 teenage children to care for, life was a struggle.
My husband never knew what he was getting. His pay was up and down. If trawler catches were poor, there wasn't much fish for processing. So there was sometimes no work in the freezer plants for days on end.
Today, her husband, son and daughter all work at the aluminium plant. It has replaced fishing as the main source of income for the community. Producing 940 metric tons of aluminium a day, it also generates huge revenue for the national economy. Iceland has no natural deposits of aluminium ore. The raw material has to be transported thousands of miles to the factory. Electricity here is so cheap, it more than makes up for the expense of shipping. But there is a cost, and it's Iceland's wilderness that's paying the price. Some 50 kilometers east of the smelting plant lies a subterranean powerhouse. 75 kilometers of tunnels direct tons of water per second through gigantic turbines. 2 glacial rivers have been dammed and channeled to flow through this energy labyrinth. And the hydropower they create all goes to power the smelters. It's a massive engineering operation. And above ground, the scars run deep. This is Kárahnjúka Dam. Water that powers the aluminium smelter pools here in a reservoir 25 kilometers long. At nearly 200 meters high, the dam wall is the biggest of its kind in Europe, and one of the most controversial. The proposal to build the billion-dollar project triggered national outrage. Icelanders were appalled that one of Europe's largest unspoiled wildernesses was to be drowned in the name of industry. Protesters camped out at the construction site. They rallied huge international support. But they couldn't stop the march of progress. The dam and the aluminium factory are now a concrete reality, transforming the landscape and transforming lives. Factory work has thrown the community a lifeline, but not all the change is good.